Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to kick off your week. A wrap up on Trump's first international trip of his second presidency. Same as the first, but also different from the first. Same in the sense that was to the Middle East, and that is, of course, not a traditional spot where American presidents first travel. It's usually the UK or Canada. But not a surprise. These are, of course, the countries where Trump has the best personal relations. The leaders are on speed dial. He engages with them very well. I mean, aspirationally, he sees himself. He would like to be the leader of a Gulf state in capacity, right? Without the checks and balances, where everyone does exactly what he wants, and the massive pomp and circumstance, and the symbolism that is freighted and accorded that. That's, of course, not true of what the way an American president works in the United States, but at least he gets a fair amount of that in the way that they respond to him. Thinking about what was different this time around from the first term, I think, is interesting. So, first of all, more and bigger commercial deals, right? I mean, he brought so many of the top American CEOs, frankly, they're the top global CEOs, with him on this trip, and they were there to get big business done, particularly the major technology companies, which are driving so much of the American stock market and also so much of the future of American growth and productivity and innovation. Those companies, most of them really wanted to be there with Trump, and they see the Gulf as very deep pockets, places where they can expand. And they came up with a lot of significant deals, some of which is aspirational, the details have to be worked out, but some of which is real. Certainly, I see that on the AI side, the semiconductor side with the UAE. I see it with a lot of the advanced technology investments, the arms investments that are going to be made, the purchases from the Saudis and the Qataris also with the biggest in their history Boeing airplane purchase. Again, all aligning these companies, these countries more with the U.S. on the national security side, broadly speaking, and frankly, less with China, despite all the energy sales that go in that direction. Also, more diplomacy. I mean, everyone talking about how this was a commercial first, a business first Trump trip. But the reality is there was a lot of geopolitics going on, and Trump was trying to move the ball, first and foremost on Syria, meeting directly with the new president of Syria and saying that he was going to undo all of the US sanctions on Syria, which would facilitate the Gulf states putting a lot more money into Syria and not falling afoul of American laws and sanctions. That's a big deal for them. There was massive support across the region and from Turkey for Trump's announcement to get that done. There is internal pushback in his own party, from his administration, from Congress, but he has enough support there to get that done. And then also the big deal question of Iran. There's been now multiple direct negotiations between the US and Iran, which was not happening under the Biden administration. Iran is in a much weaker position geopolitically. They want to get a deal done. They want to get a snapback on sanctions pushed out to the future, which otherwise would be hitting them in the fall. And they also want to ensure that they don't have a military fight on their hands with the Israelis supported by the United States. There's still a lot of work and details to occur, especially around to what extent the Iranians would be allowed a level of uranium enrichment. Right now, Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, is saying not at all. Trump is not as clear on that. The Iranians are saying definitely. But for all of you that know the art of the deal, it's maximal demands. Then you sit down and you cut a deal where you can cut a deal. So I would still be optimistic that something is going to happen in the near term, even if it's not a permanent breakthrough. Then you have so much more personal and family money that Trump is benefiting from, that there is a greater level of corruption, of conflict of interest that are happening because we see cash going from the Gulf states into Trump family investments, whether it's real estate and projects that are being developed, whether it's cryptocurrency and Trump coin and Melania coin being facilitated by investments. These things are all the way that business happens in the Gulf states, where the royal families directly control not just politics, but also the economy. In the United States, that isn't the case. That is not aligned with rule of law as historically defined by the US. But of course, the US has been becoming more kleptocratic over time, and Trump is really leaning into that. And no one seems to be in a position or willing to call him out on it. Certainly from within Trump's own party, they're tolerating things that they never would tolerate from an opposition party or even from their own party historically. But those things are now changing, and it creates more impunity for other actors that want to engage in politics and economic overlap in that way themselves, also making things harder for countries that have a real problem with it, like the European Union, for example, or Japan. And then finally, no Israel on this trip. And of course, Trump did go to Israel first time around. I'm not sure that's as big of a change because Trump did invite the Israeli prime minister to be the first leader to meet with him in the White House, in the Oval Office, right after Liberation Day. But that was not a great meeting. And Trump announced in that meeting, in front of the Israeli prime minister, that he was going to engage directly with the Iranians, something that the Israeli prime minister did not want to see. Certainly, Trump thinks that Netanyahu doesn't have the cards, kind of like he thinks Zelensky doesn't have the cards. Now, he won't say that directly, publicly to Israel, at least not yet. But the Israelis have to be thinking, what would it mean if Trump were to suspend the provision of intelligence to us? What would it mean if it would suspend military support to us? They'd never consider that as a possibility under Biden, but under Trump, who has an administration that is well funded by the Israeli right and their supporters in the United States. It's well funded and supported of all of the biggest things that are out there, like, for example, the Golan Heights annexation. Trump was the one that recognized that. The move of the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, Trump is the one that actually got that done. So his bona fides on supporting the hard line in Israel are very high, but his willingness to beat up nominal friends when they don't do exactly what he wants, that's also strong as well. And there, I think it's very interesting to watch how this relationship plays out. If I were Bibi, I'd be a lot more careful with Trump than I was with Biden. That's it for me, and I'll talk to y'all real soon.